Weddings are supposed to be the one day where everything, just for a moment, feels perfect. Where love wins, families unite, and you dance under fairy lights without thinking about anything but the next step. But that's not always how it goes, especially when your family thinks your happiness comes with conditions. My name's Landon. I'm 32 years old, and I married the love of my life 2 months ago in what should have been the happiest day of our lives. It was, until one conversation, one smug sentence, turned the entire event into a battlefield I never saw coming. Let me back up a bit. I grew up in a family that measures worth by money, titles, and bloodlines. The Reeds are the kind of family that believes success should look a certain way. Ivy League degree, six-figure job by 30, married to someone with a strong name, and at least one family business in their back pocket. I didn't exactly tick all those boxes, but I wasn't some cautionary tale either. I built a solid career in UX design, launched a small firm with two close friends in Austin, and worked my way to a comfortable life. I didn't want yachts and legacy trusts. I just wanted enough to build a home with someone who made me feel seen. That person turned out to be Emery. Emery is everything my family pretends to be, but never is. Kind, grounded, and sharp in a way that doesn't beg for applause. We met at a community book drive I was volunteering at through work. She was helping a kid pick out a graphic novel, crouched next to him with this soft laugh that made the air feel easier. I remember thinking, she doesn't just listen, she hears people. We clicked fast but deep. No games. No half commitments. 2 years later, I proposed on a hike overlooking the hill country, and she said yes with tears in her eyes and dirt on her shoes. Perfect. Telling my family about her was complicated. My mom's first comment was, "What do her parents do?" Not "how did you meet?" Not "when can we meet her?" But "what do her parents do?" That's how they see people, through the lens of pedigree. When I told her Emery's dad had passed, and her mom was a retired public school teacher in Wisconsin, she just hummed, like the air had been let out of the room. My uncle, though, Uncle Ross, took it even further. He made little jabs here and there. Make sure she's not after your savings. Or, be careful about marrying down, Landon. Women remember that stuff. He thought he was being funny. I didn't. Ross has always been the type who confuses cruelty for charisma. Grew up with the same silver spoon, but polished it until he could see his ego in the reflection. He made his money in commercial real estate and never lets you forget it. The kind of man who calls waiters boss, but never once says thank you. He's my dad's older brother, and for some reason, his opinions carry weight in the family. Maybe it's because he speaks loudest, or maybe because my dad, a quieter man, always deferred to him like Ross had the final word on everything from career choices to which side of the family hosted Christmas. When we sent out wedding invitations, we debated leaving Ross off the list. Emery had only met him twice. Once at my cousin's baby shower, where he asked if she was part Asian, out of nowhere, and once at Thanksgiving, where he said she carried herself well for someone from a small town. Both times, she just smiled and changed the subject, trying not to make a scene. I asked her if she wanted him at the wedding. She said, "It's your family, Landon. I can handle one afternoon." I wish I hadn't let her. The planning process was stressful, but we managed to put together something beautiful. Emery's mom flew in early to help with details. Her brother, Wes, built the wooden arch we got married under. My family. They showed up late to the rehearsal dinner and complained the venue was too boho. My mom pulled me aside that night and asked if Emery's dress was going to be traditional or some artsy Pinterest thing. I brushed it off, but it stung. It always does, doesn't it? When the people who raised you treat the person you love like an accessory they didn't pick. But the day of the wedding was stunning. The weather held up, the music was perfect, and Emery looked like a dream. We exchanged vows we wrote ourselves, surrounded by fairy lights and wildflowers. I saw my best friend cry, my little niece toss petals like she was born for it, and Emery's mom clutch a handkerchief with pride in her eyes. I remember thinking, this is it. We made it. We're okay. We weren't. It happened during the reception, just after the toasts, just before the cake. Emery had stepped away to speak with some of my cousins, and I was chatting with my groomsmen near the bar. I saw Ross approach her out of the corner of my eye, drink in hand, that stupid half-smile he gets when he thinks he's about to drop some truth. I didn't think anything of it. I wish I had. A few minutes later, Emery came back. Her eyes were red, her lipstick smudged just slightly at the edge. She leaned in and whispered, "Can we talk?" I followed her to a quiet spot near the photo booth, and that's when she told me, word for word, "Your uncle just told me I seem like a sweet girl, but I married into the wrong side of the family. That I should have picked someone with better prospects." I stared at her, stunned. My stomach twisted. The blood rushed to my face so fast I thought I'd pass out. He said what? I didn't know what to say. I just walked away. The thing about love is that it isn't always gentle. Sometimes it burns through you like wildfire. And in that moment, all I could see was red. This man, this pompous, sneering excuse for an elder, had taken it upon himself to humiliate my wife at our wedding. In front of her friends. In front of mine. He'd decided his opinion mattered more than her dignity. Than our dignity. And I wasn't going to let it slide. I could have pulled him aside. Spoken quietly. Made a scene privately. That's what the mature part of my brain told me. But the other part, the part that had spent 32 years watching him bulldoze everyone around him while the family made excuses, decided it was time. Not just for Emery. For every insult that had ever been brushed off with. That's just how Ross is. So I walked to the DJ, grabbed the mic, and stopped the music. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say, but once I opened my mouth, the words just came. My voice shook at first, then steadied. Guests turned toward me, confused. My mom's smile faded. Emery stood near the edge of the dance floor, watching, hand trembling around her glass of sparkling cider. Ross. He looked amused. That wouldn't last. And that's where I'll stop for now, right at the edge. Right before the words that broke everything wide open. Right before the fallout that would leave cracks in my family we might never fill again. I didn't plan to blow up my wedding reception, but sometimes life hands you a mic and dares you to speak the truth. I stood there, holding the thing like it weighed 20 pounds, looking out at a sea of faces, some laughing, some confused, most just watching. Ross was mid-sip, leaning against a cocktail table like he was waiting for a joke. My dad was frozen. My mom started moving toward me, mouthing something I couldn't hear. But I didn't move. I didn't blink. I looked directly at Ross. "Hey, Uncle Ross," I said, my voice steady now. "Since you like giving advice to people's wives at their wedding, why don't you stand up and repeat what you just said to Emery?" Silence. Pure silence. Ross's smile stiffened. He set his glass down slowly. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about." I wasn't yelling, but I didn't need to. My voice was ringing off the tent walls. "You told my wife she seemed like a sweet girl, but she married into the wrong side of the family. That she should have picked someone with better prospects. You walked up to her, during our wedding, and decided that was the time to share your thoughts on her life choices." Gasps. Actual, audible gasps. Someone dropped a fork. Ross glanced around like he was being pranked. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," he said, voice still calm, but now clipped at the edges. "It was just a comment." "Then say it again," I challenged. "Say it in front of everyone. If it's not a big deal." He didn't. He looked at my dad instead, as if asking for backup. But Dad didn't move. Not a word. Not a blink. Just sat there, like he was carved out of stone. Ross stood there alone. I turned back to the crowd. "We invited you here to celebrate with us. To support us. Not to judge or tear us down. And if anyone thinks it's okay to disrespect my wife on our wedding day, you can see yourself out." Then I turned back to Ross and said the words I'd been holding back for years. "You've bullied your way through every family event like your money makes you untouchable. But today, you're not. Get out." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was electric. Emery was behind me now. I could feel her hand slip into mine. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Ross didn't storm out. He didn't apologize. He just scoffed, shook his head, and walked out with that same arrogant air like he still had the upper hand. But he didn't. Not anymore. I thought that would be it. That maybe, it would finally be the moment my family woke up and realized enough was enough. But I underestimated the loyalty of old money and old grudges. The fallout started less than an hour later. It began with whispers. My Aunt Delia, Ross's wife, muttering to my mother, "He's always been dramatic. This is embarrassing." Then my cousin Jared, Ross's son, came up to me near the catering tent and said, "Man, you didn't have to humiliate him like that. Could have just pulled him aside." I didn't argue. I just said, if he didn't want to be humiliated, maybe he should have kept his mouth shut. Jared shook his head like I was the unreasonable one and walked off. That night, After the last of the guests left, and we were sitting in our honeymoon suite with tired feet and uneaten slices of cake, my phone started buzzing. Text from my mother, my father, even my older sister, Margot, who hadn't said 2 words to me in months. Mom, you ruined the reception with that outburst. Ross was just joking. You embarrassed the whole family. Dad, let's talk when you cool off. Ross didn't mean it that way. Margot, not everything has to be a public takedown. Grow up, Landon. I showed the texts to Emery. She didn't say anything at first, just scrolled through them slowly, blinking too fast. Then she looked up at me and asked, "Do you regret it?" I shook my head instantly. Not even a little. She nodded, but her mouth tightened. Then I won't either. But the thing about words is, they echo. Especially in families like mine, where image is everything and silence is currency. Within days, the narrative began to shift. I was sensitive. I overreacted. Ross just made a comment. Suddenly, I was the problem. Not the man who told my wife she married beneath herself, but me, for calling it out. We came back from our honeymoon to a flurry of passive-aggressive messages and one very awkward family lunch that my mother insisted on hosting to clear the air. I didn't want to go, but Emery said, "Let's just get through it. Then we know where we stand." The lunch was at my parents' house. My mom made lemon chicken, her default peace-offering meal, and set the table with the fancy plates, like we were pretending everything was fine. Ross wasn't there, but his presence hovered over every polite sentence. "We all just want to move forward," Mom said, cutting into her chicken like she wasn't slicing open my patience. Emotions were high. It was a beautiful wedding, and sometimes people say things they don't mean. I set down my fork. He meant it. Dad cleared his throat. Ross has always had a blunt way of speaking. He called me a mistake, Emery said quietly, not raising her voice, not crying, just stating it like a fact. To my face. At our wedding. Mom gave a tight smile, like Emery had just said something slightly offensive at a dinner party. He didn't say that. No, I cut in. But he meant it. And you know it. That was the moment. That shift in the room where I realized, really realized, that they weren't going to back me. That they weren't interested in truth, or healing, or even understanding. They just wanted things back to normal. For me to smooth it over, say it was a misunderstanding, pretend it didn't matter. But it did. The real betrayal came a few days later. I was in the middle of a client call when I got a notification, an Instagram tag. I clicked it, assuming it was one of our wedding guests posting late photos. It wasn't. It was a post from Margot. A carousel of family photos with a long caption about forgiveness, family unity, and how one bad moment doesn't define a lifetime. She tagged me. She tagged Emery. She even tagged Ross. I scrolled through the comments. People were chiming in, friends, extended relatives, even some of Ross's business partners, saying things like, "Family first. Love conquers all. Proud of you for being the bigger person, Margot." It made my skin crawl. They were rewriting the story. Publicly. They were painting me as the black sheep who threw a tantrum and caused a rift. Emery as the outsider who couldn't handle a joke. Ross as the misunderstood patriarch who meant well. I didn't even have to check. Emery had seen it too. She didn't say anything when I got home. Just handed me her phone with the post already open. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Landon, what do we do now?" Because she knew. We both knew. That this wasn't just about a comment anymore. This was about loyalty. About truth. About whether we were going to swallow it and move on, or draw a line in the sand that might not ever be erased. And that's where things really began to unravel. I don't think there's a word that perfectly captures what it feels like when you realize your own family has chosen someone else's comfort over your truth. Betrayal doesn't quite do it justice. Neither does disappointment. It's more like watching your childhood home slowly disappear in the rearview mirror, brick by brick, while everyone inside waves like nothing's wrong. After Margot's Instagram post, after the comments poured in praising her maturity and grace, I knew exactly where we stood. Not on shaky ground, not in some murky middle. We were outside the circle, locked out of a narrative being spun to protect everyone except us. Emery stopped responding to messages from my mom. I didn't tell her to. I didn't have to. She's never been the type to keep people close out of obligation, and frankly, she'd already been far more patient than most would have. Meanwhile, I tried, at first, to explain. I sent Margot a long message, trying to spell it out. that Ross's comment wasn't just a bad moment. That her post made it look like Emery and I were ready to forgive and move on when we hadn't even had a real apology. Her reply? A thumbs up. Literally. That was it. If I'm being honest, the weeks after that were dark. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just heavy. Quiet. I stopped checking the family group chat, and when I finally did, it was filled with cheerful updates like nothing had happened. Photos from my cousin's engagement dinner. Invites to a brunch my mother organized for the girls. Emery wasn't included. Links to a new family shared album called Read Moments. I wasn't tagged in anything. Neither was she. I started sleeping later, working longer hours at the office just to avoid coming home and facing the silence between us. Not the kind that meant we were fighting, just the kind that builds when two people are carrying too much and don't know how to put it down. Emery tried to stay upbeat. She kept cooking our favorite meals, kept watching old comedy specials with me at night, even started planning a weekend road trip to reset. But I saw the tiredness in her eyes. The way her laughter didn't quite reach her face anymore. I knew it was my turn to lead us out of that fog, but for a while, I didn't know how. That changed with a phone call. It was from Wes, Emery's brother, a mechanic who runs his own shop out in Madison and once rebuilt an entire transmission in our driveway, just because Emery mentioned my car was acting up. He's quiet, but solid. The kind of guy who lets actions speak first. He called one Friday evening, right as I was about to leave work. You got a second? He asked. Yeah, I said, dropping back into my chair. Everything okay? He was silent for a moment. Then, she called me. I didn't need to ask who. My mom, he said, filling in anyway. Apparently she saw some Facebook comment about your wedding. Something about Emery crying. She didn't know what happened until now. I closed my eyes. And she's pissed. That surprised me. She said if your family thinks they can treat her daughter like that, and then plaster her face on their social media like everything's fine, they're out of their minds. He chuckled under his breath. She also said, and I quote, if Ross Reed ever breathes near my daughter again, I'll break his nose with a salad fork. That made me laugh for the first time in days. Like, really laugh. Listen, Wes continued. I've stayed out of it 'cause Emery asked me to. But I've seen how it's weighing on both of you. And I just wanted to say, your family might be acting like you did something wrong, but you didn't. You did what every guy should do. You stood up for her. Don't let them make you feel crazy for that. That conversation flipped a switch. Not instantly, not like some magic movie moment. But it started something. A shift. The fog didn't clear, but I realized I could move through it. That weekend, I sat down with Emery. Really sat down. No phones. No distractions. I know I've been off, I told her. I haven't been handling this well. She looked at me, eyes soft but wary. You've been trying to carry it alone. I didn't want to dump more on you. Landon, she said, taking my hand, we're married. We're not just building a life together. We're building us. And you don't have to protect me from this. I just need you with me. That conversation didn't fix everything, but it reminded me why we did all of this in the first place. Why we said yes. Why we chose each other. So I started showing up again, not for them, but for us. I stopped checking my family's pages. I deleted the group chat. I started going to therapy, something I'd put off for years, telling myself I didn't need it. I did. Badly. It helped me see the roots of all of this. How I'd spent my whole life tiptoeing around people who saw empathy as weakness and status as virtue. It helped me realize I wasn't just grieving a broken family dynamic. I was grieving the illusion that it had ever really been healthy in the first place. I poured more energy into my business. We'd been in a bit of a lull, with 2 clients dragging their feet and a third ghosting us altogether. Instead of wallowing, I revamped our pitch deck, reached out to some old contacts, and cold emailed 3 companies I'd been too intimidated to approach before. One of them, a sustainable furniture startup out of Oregon, responded within 48 hours. We landed the contract the next week. It was our biggest project to date. I told Emery by taking her out to dinner at the same food truck lot where we had our third date. She wore the same green jacket she'd worn that night. I remembered because it had a little tear in the sleeve, and she'd stitched it herself with dark blue thread. We're gonna be okay, I told her over tacos. Actually, better than okay. She smiled, that real kind of smile, and said, I never had any doubt. It didn't stop the pangs. Sometimes I'd see a family photo online or get a notification that someone from the Reed side tagged me in something, only to click and see they'd tagged the wrong Landon Reed. Other times, I get an email from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, pretending nothing happened. Hey, hope you and Emery are doing well. Are you coming to the lake house this summer? No, we weren't. But here's the thing about loss. When you stop clutching the broken pieces of what was, you make room for what can be. We started building our own traditions. Sunday morning walks to the farmer's market. Monthly game nights with Emery's co-workers. I invited Wes and his wife down for a weekend, and we grilled in the backyard and played cards until midnight. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't Instagram-worthy, but it felt right. And the more I invested in the life we were creating, the less I cared about the one I left behind. Until, of course, they found a way to claw back in. It started with a letter, not an email, not a text. A literal, printed letter on crisp white stationery that arrived in our mailbox on a rainy Thursday. No return address. Inside was a single page. Typed, "This has gone on long enough. It's time to stop punishing the entire family for one misunderstanding. You made your point, but you're not the only ones who got hurt. Think about your parents. Think about your sister. Think about your future." No signature. But I recognized the phrasing, the guilt, the manipulation wrapped in faux concern. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer by the entryway. Emery didn't ask about it. She didn't have to. She knew. We both did. But it got me thinking. They hadn't let go. They hadn't moved on. They were just waiting for me to crack, for me to reach out and make amends, to play the prodigal son who finally came to his senses. And that's when I realized I'd been playing defense, dodging their attacks, patching up the damage, hoping it would all fade into the background eventually. But maybe it was time to stop hoping. Maybe it was time to do something. That thought stayed with me, quiet, patient, sharpening itself in the background, until an unexpected opportunity opened a door I never saw coming. And once it did, I knew exactly how to walk through it. The letter sat untouched in our entryway drawer for a full week. I didn't respond, didn't bring it up, didn't even mention it to Emery. But I read it at least 5 times. Not because I was hurt, but because I was studying it. Every line was crafted with precision, with the kind of phrasing meant to sound innocent until you read it again. You're not the only ones who got hurt. That one stuck with me, because it was never about us getting hurt. It was about us fighting back. That was the real offense. I was done playing the quiet son, done letting their version of the story dominate. Because while they played nice on social media and gossip behind closed doors, I was out here actually living my life. And for the first time in a long time, I had something they couldn't touch: independence. Emery and I weren't just surviving without them. We were thriving. The new contract with the Oregon startup had doubled our revenue for the quarter. Emery had been offered a senior editor role at a publishing house she'd admired for years. And we were starting to talk, really talk, about buying a home. Somewhere outside the city. Somewhere we could start fresh. And then, as if fate had a twisted sense of humor, the opportunity landed right in my inbox. It was an email from a property agent I'd worked with once before, someone who occasionally sent me listings that fit my investment portfolio. I dabbled in real estate for a while, picking up undervalued properties, renovating, and renting them out. Nothing big, just small, stable investments. But this time, the email subject line read, "Reed Hill, historical property for sale, private listing." My eyebrows shot up. Reed Hill was the name of an old estate on the edge of the city, tucked into a wooded corner with a lake view. My great-uncle had bought the place decades ago. It had been the backdrop of every important Reed family gathering for as long as I could remember: Christmas dinners, engagement parties, the occasional forced family reunion. It wasn't owned by my parents or Ross, but by a distant cousin named William who had lived in Europe for years and rarely returned. Apparently, William was finally cashing out. Quietly. No family bidding war. No offers passed around the group chat. He just wanted to sell, and he was open to anyone who could pay the asking price. I stared at the listing for a long moment, heart thudding. The asking price was steep, but not out of reach. Not anymore. I knew if I bought it, I wouldn't just be purchasing land or a house. I'd be holding the crown jewel of Reed family nostalgia. The place my mom once called our legacy. The place Ross used to brag about to his friends, acting like he owned it just because he hosted a 4th of July barbecue there once. The place where Emery and I were conspicuously not invited the year before we got married, because, as my mother had said, it was just going to be family. I called the agent within the hour. By the next morning, I'd put in an offer. Full price. No contingencies. In cash. It was accepted that same afternoon. I didn't tell anyone for 2 weeks. Not Emery. Not Wes. No one. I needed time to think. Not about whether I'd done the right thing. I knew I had. But about what to do with it. That's when the setup began. The first step was subtle. I asked the agent to update the online property records immediately, making my name the listed owner. Public databases take a while to update, but there are ways to speed things up if you know where to look. I wanted it to be discoverable, not announced. I wanted someone from the family to stumble on it naturally, maybe while checking permits or talking to their country club realtor. I wanted the news to spread organically, like a virus. It worked. The first sign came through a text from Margot. Margot. Hey. Random question. Did you hear anything about the Reed Hill property? Thought I saw your name somewhere. I didn't respond. 2 days later, I got a call from my dad. I didn't answer that either. By the end of the week, my mother had sent an email. A full email, not just a message. Landon, we were hoping to reach you about something important. Could we speak sometime this week? It's regarding Reed Hill. I didn't reply. Instead, I made an appointment with a landscape architect and started drafting renovation plans. Not just cosmetic upgrades. I was going to reshape the property from the inside out. Tear down the guest house that Ross used to stay in every summer. Expand the gardens where they once posed for family photos. Build a new wraparound deck facing the lake, something Emery had always dreamed about. This wasn't going to be their estate anymore. It was going to be ours. But I wasn't done. The next step was psychological. I reached out to a friend of mine, Darren, who ran a local event management company. Darren owed me a favor from years ago when I helped him design a pitch deck that landed him a major hotel partnership. I told him I wanted to host a private event at Reed Hill. Something small, elegant, just enough to catch attention. He was more than happy to help. We scheduled the event for early spring, just warm enough to host something outdoors. I called it a seasonal evening gathering, intentionally vague. I invited a mix of people, Emery's family, close friends, business partners, and a few colleagues from my firm. I made a public Facebook event set to friends of friends visibility and tagged a handful of people I knew had mutuals in the Reed family circle. I didn't invite a single Reed, but I made sure they'd see it. The event photos were everything I wanted them to be. Candles on the lawn, soft string music drifting over the lake, warm lighting on the old stone walls, Emery laughing in a navy blue dress as her mom toasted us with a glass of Prosecco. I hired a professional photographer and posted the album the next morning with a simple caption, "Grateful for this new chapter." The fallout was instant. Ross called me within 24 hours. I didn't answer. My mom sent another email. We would appreciate the courtesy of a conversation before making any drastic changes to family spaces. My dad, the most silent of them all, texted me a single line, "You've made your point." But I hadn't. Not yet. Because the final piece of the setup was still in motion. I started organizing a retreat, a long weekend getaway for small business owners and creatives. Something relaxed and collaborative. I called it the Hill Sessions. I built a website. I crafted an invite list. I even contacted local caterers and guest speakers. The idea was simple. Transform Reed Hill into something useful. Something ours. No more Christmas dinners with plastic smiles and silent wars across the table. This was going to be a place for building, not pretending. I told Emery about it one night while we were sitting on the new dock. She blinked at me for a moment, then let out a soft laugh. "You're really doing it, huh?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Taking the whole thing back." I shrugged. "Not for revenge." She tilted her head. "No, no," I said, smiling faintly. "For us." She leaned into me then, head on my shoulder, and said, "Then let's do it right." But here's the thing about revenge. Sometimes it doesn't need to scream. Sometimes it just needs to exist. Quiet, defiant, unshakable. And as spring approached, and word spread, and the Reed name started to fade from the hill that once bore it, I knew the final blow was coming. I just had to wait for the perfect moment to deliver it. I waited 3 full months before inviting them. The Reed Hill property had undergone its first wave of renovations by then. The old guest house Ross used to brag about had been torn down to the studs and rebuilt into a minimalist lakeside cottage, with solar panels, a private path to the dock, and a kitchen so cleanly modern it made Mom's favorite farmhouse aesthetic look like a relic. The main house had been stripped of every dusty oil painting, every smug family portrait, every reminder that the Reeds once ruled this place like it was a throne room. It was ours now, not just by paperwork, but by presence. The retreat, the Hill Sessions, was a resounding success. Local creatives, entrepreneurs, and friends spent a long weekend trading ideas and stories by the fire pit while music played low across the lawn. Emery led a panel on storytelling through editing. I gave a talk about sustainable design. Strangers left as collaborators. Friends left as family. That weekend, Reed Hill wasn't a place of privilege. It was a place of purpose. That's when I knew the time was right. The final phase of my plan was about control. Not anger. Not shouting matches or Facebook rants. Just a quiet, decisive shift in who held the keys. I wrote a letter. One by one, I sent personal invitations to every member of the Reed family. My parents, Margot, Ross, even Jared. I called it a founder's brunch. Polished, neutral, almost corporate. No emotion. Just a respectful, elevated tone. The kind they'd expect from someone who'd matured. The kind they'd trust. I hosted it on a Sunday morning, 3 weeks after the retreat, at Reed Hill. The driveway was freshly paved. The flowers Emery's mom had planted in the spring were now in full bloom. The welcome sign read, "Welcome to Hillview Estate." Not Reed Hill. That name was gone. The family trickled in, hesitant, cautious, but curious. Even Ross came. He stepped out of his car like a man entering a courtroom he still believed he could sway. I greeted each one personally. No sarcasm. No coldness. Just calm. Controlled. "Thanks for coming," I said to my mother, who looked around the grounds like she was seeing it for the first time, because she was. "Landon," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "This place looks very different." "That's the idea," I replied. We served brunch on the new deck facing the lake. Emery stayed mostly in the background, welcoming people, offering drinks, polite but distant. They noticed. I wanted them to. The conversation started light. Jared asked about the garden layout. Margot complimented the reclaimed wood beams. My dad said the lake looked cleaner. But eventually, as I knew it would, someone broke the surface. It was my mother. She cleared her throat gently, placing her fork down like she was about to make a business proposal. "We were hoping, since you invited us here, that perhaps we could all start over. As a family." I nodded slowly. "That's what today is for." Ross raised an eyebrow. "Really?" I met his eyes. "Yes. But let's be clear. I'm not forgetting what happened. I'm not pretending Emery imagined your words, or that the family didn't try to gaslight both of us after the fact." He opened his mouth, but I kept going. "What I am doing is showing you who I've become since then. You all spent so long trying to define me, measure me, decide whether I was living up to your expectations. And for a while, I let that define how I saw myself." I gestured around. "But this place? This is mine. Built from my own choices, my own people, my own values. And you're sitting here today not because you're entitled to be, but because I invited you." My mother looked stunned. Margot blinked rapidly. My dad stared at the table. Ross, of course, scoffed. "So what? This was all a setup to humiliate us again," he said, pushing his chair back. "No," I said calmly. "This is an invitation to step into reality. I'm not part of your hierarchy anymore. There is no throne here, Ross. No family court where you get to cast judgment on people's worth. There's just a home. And you're either welcome here on the terms of mutual respect, or not at all." He stood, hands on his hips. "You've got some nerve, kid." I smiled. "Maybe. But I also have the deed." And then I pulled it out. An embossed folder from the county clerk's office. I opened it and laid the pages on the table. Not just the deed, but the renovation permits, the rezoning approvals, the name change application for Hillview Estate. Everything legal. Everything final. I watched the moment Ross realized it was over. Not just the argument, but the illusion that he still held sway over me. That he could sneer his way back into the center of the room. "You renamed it?" my father asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "The Reed name doesn't live here anymore." There was a long, ringing silence. Then Emery stepped forward, holding a tray of drinks. She offered one to my mother first, an act of grace I didn't ask for, but one that only deepened the contrast between the woman I married and the family I came from. My mother hesitated, then took it. Ross didn't. He turned, muttered something about wasting his time, and walked off toward his car without another word. No one stopped him. The brunch continued, but lighter now. Less stiff. More real. Margot apologized before she left. Stammered, fumbled, but she said it. My mom lingered at the end, standing with me at the dock. I don't understand how it got this bad, she said softly. It didn't get bad, I said. It got honest. She looked at me with something close to grief. I didn't comfort her. That was never my job. In the weeks that followed, things didn't magically resolve. We weren't suddenly a happy family. Ross never called again. My dad remained mostly silent. Margot reached out once more to share photos of her kids. I responded politely. Nothing more. But here's the thing. When you stop needing their validation, you get to build something better. Something of your own. Emery and I did that. We held our wedding reception in the wreckage of who they thought I was. And now, we live on top of it. Not in revenge, but in peace. And that's the part they'll never understand. When you stop chasing their approval, you start living on your own terms.